right, so Dr. Nick, thanks again. It's good to see you today.
Good to see you, Paul. Thanks again for having me have this experience, this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So today we're going to build off what we've been discussing. And so far, and it was great to learn more about you. Thank you for sharing. I think that's real important that we all have a greater understanding of the master that we're all learning and listening from. And what I thought would be good is starting off just going over some of the key things that we spoke about. And, one of the areas that we spent a lot of time on was just, again, how important the mental wellness is and differentiating also in the way we are looking at, say, mental wellness versus mental illness. And we spoke about that. And really what we're doing is spending more time on the wellness. And that was a great, for those, if you're tuning into this one today, you may want to visit that past one because it's a really good way to break down what we are going to be exploring more, which is clearly on the wellness side. And the other thing I thought was real interesting is when you talked about the brain versus the mind and how really we're going to be spending a lot of time on the mind and how working on the mind will impact the brain, which in turn impacts the body, and then incorporating the spirit within all of these conversations, so that we're looking at the whole of the human and the whole of the human experience. And that's one of the things I think that's really neat about what we're doing is that we're really speaking to more than just leaders and people that are running organizations. We're really talking to everyone. That's employers, employees, teachers, students, coaches, athletes. It really is something that I think is all-encompassing and that we all can learn from this. And I think that's one of the things that I know you and I want to make sure that all of the people that are tuning in and listening, that, this is for each of you. It's not that we're really trying to limit our impact that we're trying to have on improving the mental well-being.
Absolutely. There's so much there, what you said already, Paul. As we talk about the kind of spirit that moves us and having a reason and a purpose, to live life. So be glad to get started.
Yeah, great. And that was a great segue, Dr. Nick, because that's really what we're going to talk about today is, after we had that conversation around the importance and even going into why a lot of people still find the whole mental wellness topic taboo and why they shouldn't, what we're going to do today is spend really on going up high, going above all this and talking about purpose and talking about meaning and how important really starting from the top and thinking in that way as to how it impacts everything else. So if we think about it as from the perspective of how we want to shape this or for people to incorporate it, we want to talk about purpose and meaning as the foundation.
Wonderful.
Okay, so let me share the screen so we could pull up the first slide. Okay, so again, starting with the basics, Dr. Nick, and really looking at purpose. We all need a reason to live, and that reason could vary, of course, among all of us. But what drives that purpose, and can we really live well without a purpose?
Great introduction, and it's a really complicated concept and process, but again, let's start with the basics. If a child is healthy, as there's no physical limitations or biological or mental ones, all children learn how to walk. That's a pretty interesting phenomenon. So a parent, when the child's ready, holds the child by their two hands on their fingers and gets the child to walk. Now, as the child is walking, the child falls down. Any children who haven't learned to walk? So when you look at what happens to the child automatically from a very early stage in their life, there's something that's driving them to do what they're doing. So if we look at children walking, how many children actually give up, no matter how many times they fall down?
Hmm.
Now, it's an interesting process to observe because if a child falls down and mom or dad runs over and say, "Oh, did you get hurt? Oh, you fell down." The parent might start teaching the child that falling down is not the right thing.
Interesting.
They're going to get back up and just do it anyway. Now, how
Right.
does that happen? Um, Now, clearly, they haven't learned to do that to begin with. They learned a few things about standing up, but that process that drives them, even through walking, there's something that's purposeful, right?
Hmm. Yes.
So, psychologists, we have all the answers, and if we don't, we make them up, and you've heard that before.
All right.
But psychologists say there's only two basic purposes, in life. When you look at even how the brain develops and the emotional experiences, is to have the experience with pleasure or have the experience with discomfort. So, because the brain is wired in only differentiating those two basic emotional states, physiologically, we're like that. But over a period of time, you can have maybe 8, 9, 12 different emotional states, but they kind of blend together.
Hmm.
But it's from those basic experiences in life, those things that are soothing and comforting, and those things that are uncomfortable, that really drives the purpose for what we do every day.
Right. Very cool.
Interesting phenomenon. And so if we go back now to the child who's learning to walk, well, maybe they're learning to walk to please their parents, but to make the assumption that we know that that's the case, I think is an error.
I see.
So when you take a look at how the nature within the human starts to come through us, and that there's an energy source, all children learn to walk in spite of what happens to them, and even in spite of what their parents might do.
Hmm. That is a cool phenomena.
So that's what we're talking about from the basic point, as we're looking at reasons to live now at a much more sophisticated level, because levels of consciousness, are not developed, in a child at that age, and
Hmm.
levels of consciousness obviously change as we mature.
Right.
And so as consciousness starts to occur, we then start to make differentiations between things that are pleasurable for us and things that are not so pleasurable.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about that so far?
Yeah, no, and I guess the thing that I'm thinking about too is with purpose, there's an evolving um, meaning to it as well. Like it evolves throughout your life, right? So I think one of the things about purpose is that it's also not static. That it changes, but with changes, it grows. And I think that's what's interesting too when we think about purpose. And you look back at what you were talking about, the walking, and walking turns to running, and running turns to like somebody may say, well, how fast can I go?
Good question. Right, yeah.
Right, right. So, and I think one of the things we want to incorporate with purpose and reason are, if we look at it from the impact that someone can have that's trying to, whether they're managing a team, they're in front of a classroom or running an organization, how can that person help with um, someone finding meaning and purpose in what they're doing?
Yeah, great. I mean, so if we look at, basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and people are familiar with that, the basic qualities and principles of life that you have the basic needs met, and then all the way up to self-actualization, and then posthumously transcendence. Um, so I think that there's some modeling about those hierarchy, based upon that theory about what happens even in terms of leadership, is
Hmm.
that you have to make sure that the individuals that you are responsible for have those basic needs being met.
Right.
Now, shelter, that kind of stuff is taken care of, they're working for you, but are you absolutely intending on helping the person get to the highest step of actualization?
Hmm.
Are we really talking about how people can discover what their potentials are? Now, you know that a lot of people will be in positions of leadership believing that you understand what the individual's potentials are and you're going to
Right.
help cultivate them.
Yep.
But sometimes even leaders don't know what their potentials are.
Hmm.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is that in order to raise people awareness of their own potential, wouldn't it be great if the leader was actually modeling their own discovery of their own potential?
Absolutely. And what's your thoughts, Dr. Nick, on the idea of having a purpose with the team, and how that purpose evolves, and how do you get others to grow through that process?
You're actually talking about a culture now, right? Because
Yes.
that's what you're trying to develop within the team.
Yep.
And so is the team setting the culture? Is the leadership setting the culture? So when you look at families, right? Parents are responsible for setting the cultural experiences.
Hmm.
And then we see what happens in families at times because of different stages of development. Children have different purposes and different needs because that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
What happens in corporations? And you're trying to develop this culture. Everybody's not at the same developmental stage.
Right.
So, where the culture is to try to foster more self reliance or discovery or support,
Hmm.
if the individual really isn't in that place, that's where you have problems with the development of culture and getting everybody on the same page. That's why leadership is so important in being able to understand where each individual is. We're getting back to this whole understanding phenomenon, right?
Right. Right.
So it starts there. And once you can start identifying where people are and then where you're trying to bring them, as the corporation or as the system of the culture is permeating. But
Hmm.
first of all, it starts there and recognizing that not everybody is on the same page at the same time.
Interesting. So, one of the things then with I guess the evolution of purpose, or having purpose be more impactful within an organization, within a team, within a classroom, within a family, I think that understanding is so important. It's have, and you spoke about this earlier, the curiosity, right? So the curiosity around, how can I either do better? How can I improve upon what I'm working on? But I think having that understanding, I think, is real important, and how you need to understand how someone is interpreting the culture, how they're acting within the culture. So I think that is an important characteristic that you have to have from the leadership perspective, or the teacher's perspective, is really grasping onto a deep level of understanding of who is on your team.
Right. Well, clearly you have a mission statement for, what the corporation is to be or what you want your family to be. And maybe you're not articulating, but if you really want to know what the person's mission statement is, watch what they do in their
Yeah,
life.
exactly. What they
That's
say and do are two different things.
right. And so, that would be an important piece. So when you look at understanding any of the members of the team, that's what you do, right? So you
Right.
observe people's behaviors and you say, well, they're in the team, they're not in the team, they have same values, they don't. But is it because they don't really have those same, or they have values, they haven't learned it, that hasn't been understood? So let's go back to something elemental. We talk about the basics. You have a job description,
Yeah. Yep.
you have a mission statement, and you
Yep.
have job descriptions.
Right.
Now, do job descriptions change? And are people really adhering to what the job descriptions are?
Right.
So if we go back to understanding, even at that elemental level of the members of the team, is the job description really understood? And is the individual feeling like they belong because they're meeting the expectations, or that they're not? So something as simple as that basic, even in the foundation of a corporation, job descriptions and mission statements, is there a congruence? Do they actually meet?
Right.
So that
Right.
would be a fundamental place to begin.
Gotcha.
So that the purpose, right, for someone even being employed is set out in what the job description is and what the mission statement is.
Hmm.
We're making the assumption that the person who's now becoming part of the team, their purpose is part of their purpose is to adhere to the job description, to adhere to what the culture is, to adhere to the mission statement, adhere to the mission statement. However, there are so many factors
Mm.
in personalities and stages of development that's going to influence this. So we really need to look at those kinds of basic things about, is the person capable of doing the job? Or are they willing to? So there's all those kinds of phenomena around this whole understanding, but it starts as simple as what the mission statement is, that's what the culture is, and job descriptions that fit within that.
Right. Got it. And I think that's real important. And we'll go on to our next topic. But I think it was great that you didn't even intend to do this, but it really is reinforcing what we're trying to, at a very base level, talk about is having a more humanistic approach to the way in which we are teaching or running our teams or overseeing our organizations, whatever it may be, because by being more humanistic, you're going to grasp a willingness to understand more about who is on your team. And then understanding has to be so much more than transactional. And I think that's something that we'll continue to explore. So thank you.
Well, this is an interesting metaphor because you just reflected of what you described as my non-intention, which was obviously a subconscious intention.
Hmm.
So your understanding that and bringing that to my awareness produced a different reaction in me. So now we're having this kind of exchange, and hopefully as people are watching this, they're getting a sense of this.
Right.
That your understanding and explaining to people, the viewers, about what's going on is an example of that exact phenomenon of my purpose and belief system, the spirit that kind of that comes through me and
Yeah.
communicate with people as it does you. That's
Right.
what we're talking about. There's a
Yeah.
great exchange.
Yeah. That was awesome. Well done.